Red Bull's 2024 season is not starting well after they had an amazing 2023 season where they won 21 out of 22 races. Even though the RB20 car is supposed to be a huge improvement over the RB19, they just failed their first big test, and it's not a small failure either. They need to pass this test for their car to be allowed to race. While all the other teams are hoping Red Bull might mess up in 2024, this news made them very happy. But could this really hurt Red Bull's development and give their competitors a chance? Crash tests are something every Formula One car must pass to be allowed to race, and failing this test is definitely not how you want to start your season. Unfortunately for Red Bull, this is exactly what happened. The front nose of the RB20 didn't absorb the energy from hitting the wall properly, breaking into tiny pieces and failing the test. This was the first big frontal crash test done on the RB20 at Cranfield in the UK since Red Bull had such a strong advantage with the RB19. They were one of the first teams to have the chance to test the RB20 early, but that didn't give them the result they wanted on their first try. When the nose didn't absorb the crash energy properly, it caused more damage to the rest of the car's body. To understand why this is so important, you need to know how a proper crash test works. There are only two places in the world that can do these tests properly: Milan and Cranfield. Like every other vehicle, a crash test needs to be passed for it to be declared safe. But unlike other racing categories, F1's testing is much stricter because of the tough conditions these cars race in. The pressure put on the front wing sets a standard that must be met for the test to be successful. The rest of the car body is mounted on a sled and crashed directly into a wall. The test gives inspectors lots of information about the front wing, steering wheel area, and rear section of the car, plus a fuel tank test to make sure it stays safe during a simulated crash. On the track, the conditions of this test are similar to what would happen on a real track. With the crash happening at about 17 meters per second, the inspectors say the test failed if the car stops too suddenly or does the complete opposite, bends too much, and damages other parts of the car. If the front wing can't absorb enough energy, which is what happened to the RB20, the test is very precise. Since most of the material being tested is carbon fiber, the inspectors need tons of light to see all the small and big damage made to the car from the crash test. But why did the RB20 fail the test when they had one of the most dominant cars in racing history just a few months ago? As you already know, Red Bull stopped developing the RB19 in the middle of 2023 because it was practically unbeatable and there was no need to spend more money improving that version of the car, so the team started working on the 2024 season. However, Red Bull chose a more aggressive approach with the RB20, worried that the gap in 2024 would close. Horner constantly said that the 2023 season wouldn't repeat and the Austrian team should be ready for much closer competition in the upcoming season. One of the problems the RB19 had, which also went back to the RB18, was the weight of the car. Throughout their upgrades, the team tried to remove as much weight as possible. The first crash test failure suggests that the RB20 might have gone too far with removing weight. The RB19 was above the 798 kilograms minimum weight limit, and Adrian Newey said in an interview that making the car lighter would be one of the main goals for the upcoming season. It will be an evolution, not a complete change compared to the 2023 season, even though the test failed. It obviously doesn't mean Red Bull has already given up and the upcoming season is lost. On the contrary, it gave them the chance to fix their problems just in time. But it proves Horner's early statements about the RB20 when talking about the 2024 car. Horner was sure that they were starting to get smaller improvements from the wind tunnel and there was only so much they could do to improve from the previous year. To be fair, that's a very hard thing to do considering their extremely good season, but if these failures continue, then Adrian Newey might be forced to go back to the drawing board because it's obvious that certain parts of their philosophy and design aren't working correctly. This will give Red Bull's competitors a very good starting point heading into the 2024 season. The Austrian team's plan is simple: continue dominating with what they already have. But with all the teams closing the gap, and with the FIA stopping teams from developing 2026 cars before 2025, it's obvious that situations like this could shape the 2024 season differently. What is definitely sure is that Red Bull will have to look closely at the design of the front nose of the RB20, but considering they've made such great progress in the current technical era, it's very unlikely this will be a massive step backward for Red Bull. This has been talked about by Paul Monaghan, the chief engineer of Red Bull, who said, "It won't surprise you if I tell you that the new car will be an evolution of the current car. It would be foolish to throw away this concept, but at the same time we have to make progress. We need to be able to find faster lap times. The competition is right behind us, and if they take a step forward, we have to take a bigger step forward. In the RB20, the lessons we learn from the current car will come back, as will the good parts. Then in Bahrain next year we will see if we have done well enough." So far, reports say Red Bull is also working on upgrading the Venturi channel. This part proved to be very important in keeping the balance of running the car as low to the ground as possible without triggering the bouncing problem. Combined with the double-floor sideboard design, Red Bull has set the standard for the rest of the teams to follow. But the crash test failure just shows that even though Red Bull had the most time to work on the RB20, it doesn't mean they got everything right on the first try. According to Max Verstappen, there are still certain areas where Red Bull needs to improve, and one of those is how the car performs on street circuits. Even though there's only one street circuit that Red Bull lost in 2023, and that's basically the only race they lost all season. Singapore, the three-time world champion, feels like the low-speed corners and curves are a weak point for the RB19 and should definitely be fixed for the upcoming season. Talking more about this matter, Verstappen said, "Mainly I think just street circuits and low-speed curbing. These kinds of things I think we're not the best at the moment." These comments were passed on to Peer Watch, where he addressed Verstappen's comments and explained the team sees that same weakness, maybe from a different perspective than Max because Max is a driver, but it's more or less summarized quite well where we have to work for next year. Low speed is clearly one area. 90-degree corners are not the best, as you could see in qualifying in Baku, and a different track type there. Singapore was also not a fantastic one. And also our ability to ride the curbs and bumpy tracks is also not perfect, and we have to improve this area. In our system and in this business, you never get anything for free. Obviously, there are so many areas where Red Bull could improve, and even though it seems like they've built the perfect machine in the eyes of F1 fans, the crash test failure and the comments made by Verstappen and Watch do give their competitors hope they could have close competition in 2024. And rest assured, they're going to hold on to this hope as strongly as they can. There aren't that many clues that Red Bull could offer to Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren when it comes to failing at a certain development area.